on, mate, no worries. I'm just going to knock out this quick review. It's not going to be too bad, it's just a small little cake. What the f... Hello and welcome back, and that is right, this behemoth here on the table is the Silverstone CS380 V2. This is another of the custom DIY have your own NAS server case on the market, and ever since we started looking into the Jonsbo and other NAS solutions out there, there have been a lot of you that have been highlighting other brands out there that have been rocking around in this industry for, if not just years, we are talking decades. And one name that just kept coming up time and time again was these guys and their towers. Indeed, we did an overview of pretty much all the recommended NAS enclosures for DIY NAS builds on Amazon, and one of the brands that had the largest arrangement of ready-to-go solutions in both desktop and rack mount form was Silverstone. And in today's video, we're going to unbox this and take a good long look at this case. But a few disclaimers straight out the bat. Number one, this is not a build video. We are working with Silverstone for this case. They've supplied this case to us. I hope we get to keep it. And we've also contacted a brand called Icy Dock in order to get hold of some docks to go inside this. Ultimately, we want to build one of the most fully populated desktop storage builds out there. And for that, we needed a desktop casing like this one, but also the ability to add even more. But more details on that build later on. But for now, let's take a look at this. Before we open it up, just real quick, this is an 8-drive tower case build. A lot of you are probably going to look at this case and just think, oh, it's just a normal PC case with some bells and whistles. And do you know what? There might be some truth to that in terms of the chassis design. Silverstone have not reinvented the wheel here, at least as far as a standard under-the-counter desktop chassis. But I've got to say, as far as chassis designs go for something that's going to be designed as desktop level large-scale storage and taking advantage of some of the biggest components out there, this is pretty much good to go, and it's clearly been designed with server use rather than traditional desktop power use in mind. But let's have a look what we get for our money. So we'll have a look what's inside. Again, it doesn't include a controller board, doesn't include any network connections. We are talking solely here about a device that gives you the casing to fill with your own NAS server stuff of choice. In the UK and Europe, you're looking at about 150 to 160 euros. In the US, however, I've seen pricing jump quite significantly higher than that. I've seen this knocking around for 199, maybe even 230, 250 in terms of dollars on a multitude of different websites out there. Even though they've got locations worldwide, I was kind of surprised at the deviating price point looking around. We open this up, and I'll be straight with you. Protection wise, given points, this thing is pretty well protected. Again, we've got nothing else in the box to be concerned with, so we're assuming any manuals or cables are going to be inside the chassis itself. So we'll get that on the table, get some of that through. So yeah, at the moment they're doing pretty well for protection in transit. There on there. Again, I'd love to talk about the size of this thing, but let's be realistic about this. It's a desktop PC casing scale. Oh, there's our manual there at the bottom. Find out what accessories we have, and mainly, we've got our instruction manual. Again, we could talk a little bit about the quality of that manual, but frankly, it's an instruction manual for a device that is designed as just a case to do with the way you want to. I will say it's in a multitude of languages, and fair play, at least they go into a lot more detail about that front panel. Something, when I've been doing a few builds recently, has been real lacking in a lot of the cases I've been talking about. And frankly, there's actually a lot more education and information inside there for us to play with. Let's get that up of there. And there is our giant server casing there. Let's remove all that from the table and take a little look. So, first and foremost, massive, isn't it? If we bring that closer to camera, we'll hopefully do some panning shots for you to get a closer look. That front panel there is a hinged door that allows us to access those main storage bays, and that door has a lockable component there, so we will need the key to get inside of it there. And if we have a little look inside and open up that front door. Okay, so fun fact about this device, the keys to get inside the chassis there are inside the chassis. That's right. Kind of counterintuitively, these keys were tucked inside along with the screws and the cable tie-ins there. Don't get me wrong, I only had to remove the side panel to get to them, but why on earth were these keys not inside that little bag with the manual? Anyway, let's grab ourselves our keys and take a good look inside. Have a little look. Open that up. And there we go. Now we've got access to the front of this chassis. Remember, this is empty, so it weighs nothing at the moment, but straight away we can see what makes this system pretty much better, I would argue, than a lot of just utilising traditional old style PC cases for your DIY build. First and foremost, you've got those two panels there. Most PC cases have done. That's a couple of 5.25 inch slots there that are going to be utilised when we do our IC dock installation, where we're going to be taking advantage of multiple 2.5 inch SATA 7mm height slots, and we're going to be taking advantage of M.2 enabled caddies to go in there. Again, we're going to be using some adapters and cards internally, but more on that later on. But on top of that, we've got a couple of USBs here and the audio in and out. I'll say with the USBs, they are USB 3.2 Gen 1, unfortunately there, which is a bit of a shame when we're seeing an increasing demand for that 10 gigabits per second connection there. But again, this is a version 2 of a case that already existed. I was trying to look into what exactly the version 2 of this brings over a version 1, and from what I could see, a lot of that was to do with ventilation on this, something I'm going to have to talk about later on. But if I will look at these trays, the trays very unconventionally open via that two-prong design there. You don't lock each of the individual bays. They are locked via that main doorway, which does have ventilation there built into the front of it. Again, it is a plastic chassis there, but it's not too bad. I've seen a lot worse in some cases we've talked about before. And we've got screw holes there. This isn't a click and load tray. You are going to have to use that large bag of screws that are provided there. Again, installation seems pretty straightforward. You've got the through line there for the plastic for the LED on the front to give you some information about the drive health. If we remove a block of these drives, we can see these have been put into, going to be quite a strange configuration there at the front of 2, 1 and then 5 blocked into there at the bottom, presumably because they are utilising kind of spacing there between them. But it seems a very odd mix to have this kind of 2, 1, 5 combination, and maybe in the comments someone could identify why that is. But, and again, we're going to have to get a video pan in here, but we can see there the connectors. This is a SATA and SAS equipped box here, which means that we are going to be able to take advantage of those larger 12 gig drives, as long as we've got the interfaces supplied in at the other end to take advantage of that. I mean, apart from that, it's pretty much what you would expect there. The front mounting there does show each of the slots where the LEDs will come through, and we've got that power button there which filters straight into that internal power button as well. Again, no bells and whistles. This isn't, you know, an out there expensive case. It's quite flush. It feels quite well made. It feels quite good quality. Particularly if you were going to go ahead and just reuse an old PC case, there is the question marks of just reusing for sustainability. But I think as far as a storage case is here for a proper highfalutin server, this feels and looks pretty darn good. Now, in terms of ventilation, we have a very thin ventilation strip there. I'm not so sure about that one, because one of the things I'm starting to feel by looking at this is, where is the front mounted ventilation on this chassis? If I've got this shut, you've got this slot here, but these trays don't exactly scream ventilation to me. Again, we'll have to know more when we've got these up and running for our build in the follow-up video, but at the very least, I'm sort of wondering where the ventilation here is working through the case. Now, if you look at the side panels, we can see these slightly raised areas here, which on this side, there isn't any ventilation. It's like a matte finish. And on the other side, we do have additional ventilation there. And of course, that's going to be because the motherboard is going to sit on that back wall. Now, in terms of motherboard, I'm pleased to confirm this supports pretty much everything. ATX, Mini ATX, ITX, you can run them inside this. In terms of a PSU, you'll be taking advantage of a standard class PS280X inside there, and that PSU slots neatly there into the base of the system. Now, if we look at the rear, there's a few interesting things here for us to be getting along with. Number one, we've got an extra little bay to play with here. So again, the limitations of what we can install inside this relatively, and I mean relative, compact desktop chassis, there's a lot to be getting on with. And, you know, forgive the noise there. Another thing that's really intriguing, all of those lovely PCIe slots. Again, for a PC case, this isn't going to blow you away, but for a NAS server case, when you're looking at network interface cards, when you are looking at including cards for adding even further storage, thanks to storage combo cards like this one, you're going to be able to add quite a significant amount of M.2 NVMe storage. Obviously, you're going to be bound in by, you know, the lanes of the MoBo and the CPU you choose to use, but there's still plenty to be getting on with. But one thing I am slightly concerned about there, again, is this question mark of ventilation. They clearly made changes in this V2. When you look at a lot of the reviews of the V1, one of the kind of overarching themes people had was to do with the ventilation of those main drive bays. If you look at the base of the system, they have integrated this mesh panel here. This mesh panel, presumably, it's going to allow even further air input, and it's got the guard there to collect any kind of extraneous dust and stuff that's getting drawn up through that fan there at the base. But still, nonetheless, there's still quite a lot, I would say, of ventilation question mark for us to address there. So let's get the other sides of these panels off and take a good look inside and see just what we're working with here in terms of the installing of motherboards and such. So let's pop that in there. Let's remove that. I'll get that open. And there inside we can take a good old long look at the gubbins we got to play with. So number one, we've got those additional fans there. Now remember, where those fans were, this is where we found that additional vent panel. So clearly they've listened to some people, and I'm assuming the version 1 of this case did not have the identical placement of these fans and this mesh panel here on the front. So at the very least, that is going to be drawing air quite neatly all the way through. Again, we've got further fan here at the top, so we've got those 3 combined fans throughout the whole system. Each one of them is a 120mm fan. And the hard drive cage there, that odd placement of 2, 1 and 5, leads into a backplane there that has 2 SATA connectors per drive bay there. You can see it just along the back there, and presumably that is for that greater bandwidth afforded to mini SAS. It also goes into a single Molex connector, which kind of surprised me there. I would have assumed we would have had 2 Molex connectors running into this. Maybe there's one filtering into the side panel. We'll open that up in just a moment. But we do have a huge amount of space here for us to play with. Virtually no limitation with regards to CPU fan and heatsink height. You know, this is full depth casing, and we're not going to have to worry too much about that. Let's remove the second casing side. So we can remove that other panel and take a good long look on what exactly we get included on the other side. And the first thing, of course, is all of those lovely cables. We've got absolutely loads to play with. We've got those F panel cables, we've got the other additional panel, and much like we would expect. If we bring that back around, we can see what a variety of cables we've got included. So number one, we've got the F panel kind of USB connectors, as one might expect. We've also got that F panel there for each of the individual LEDs and power button. Of course, each of those individual hard drives are going to be pushing out their very own LED via the plastic connector on them. And that's really it. I mean, we are still looking at just an empty chassis cage. I mean, I would say based on what I'm seeing here, number one, there's a lot of potential for storage. To put that into perspective, again, the IC Dock ones we're going to be using, IC Dock provide a 5.25 inch cage that will allow 8 2.5 inch SATA drives to be installed in that top cavity. And they provide another one that provides 8 M.2s that can go in that top cavity. So that means we would have 8 hard drive bays, we would have 8 M.2s, and we would have 8 M.2 NVMe's. On top of that, of course, as mentioned, we intend to use a PCIe upgrade card to allow a further 8 M.2s inside via an available PCIe 3x16 or perhaps 4x16. We're thinking of running with an Intel 11th gen i5 processor that we have that's going to be built into this system. That's still going to limit the number of lanes we have afforded to us, so don't expect each of these M2s to be running on ×4. But still, nonetheless, with multiple PCIe slots supported on the card the motherboard we intend to use, an ATX, and this system having sufficient slots with those IC docks to provide even more storage, and then add to that the rear of this device has that other additional slot there at the top, we are going to be able to turn this casing into quite a powerhouse of storage. Now, ventilation-wise, that is going to be a question, isn't it? Because we're going to be thinking about, one, those 3 fans are not going to be enough. The CPU heatsink inside already on its own is going to be working overtime, and I still have reservations about the placement of those storage cages on this closed door environment, and I feel like at the very least, if you're going to include this door, they should have ventilated these just a little bit more. But of course, we're not going to know for full certainty what the temperatures we are going to hit on this case until we got it set up. For now, I will say I'll hold off full judgment on temperatures until we've got the build completed. And for the rest of it, I like it. It feels like a good build quality. It feels sturdy. It feels massive as well, of course. And until we get the motherboard inside, we won't really know about how good or bad ventilation is going to be on a device like this. But for now, let's wrap up this video. Thank you so much for watching. Again, I will keep this nice and short and sweet. I will see you on the next video where we start putting this together with our IC docks and our MoBo.